You're not that important. We're here to help people.
Tulsa Talks is the podcast that is inspiring people to have everyday meaningful conversations to gain perspective and help the world.
You have launched within the last couple of weeks a men's meeting.
Yes, sir.
Basically speaking.
Yes, sir.
What does that look like?
It's still growing,
it's fresh.
Yeah, even in the concept that God is showing me, but basically, just hands-on discipleship. When I was a kid, and I was thinking about this because I've had several people ask that question, and even praying this morning, the best way I can explain it is I grew up on a ranch. All of my role models, the men I grew up with in the ranch and farm and ranch industry, and this is in the late 60s, 70s, early 80s. These were hardcore men. These are World War II veterans, Vietnam veterans. My grandpa was World War II. Dad was a Vietnam veteran. You grow up around
So they were in their 40s and 50s back then. If they were World War II veteran, they were in their 20s or so if they were Vietnam
veteran. Yes, sir.
So these were men in their prime.
Yes, sir. These are these were my role models. These were my examples, my grandpa, my uncles. It's just all of the men around you were just men of absolute, just as a boy, what you picture strength and that is a man. And you learned as a boy, especially I had a guy ask me a few months ago about where my faith started. And I really began to research, just thinking back, spending time with God. It's been there since I was little. And I think it's a part of farming and ranching. You have a faith that other people just don't understand. At times it may not be, you've got a faith in God whether you know him or not, because you don't control the rain. You don't control the weather. You don't control when the seed ripens, when harvest happens, when pneumonia hits your cattle. You control nothing. So as a young boy, I learned, you put it out there, you've got faith it's going to grow. You've got faith that it's going to succeed. Otherwise, why do farmers and ranchers get up tomorrow morning and do the same thing over again? And I really started to see that's where my faith developed, but I saw this faith in action from the men that I grew up with and I respected. And, these were men that if they had a conversation, it meant something. There wasn't 30 minutes of talking while you saddled horses in the morning. If there was something that needs said, it got said. Other than that, you did what you needed to. Men were confident in who they were. They didn't have to use filler words and crack inappropriate jokes to fit in and make people feel you did what you had to do. And so as a young man, you learned that. Yeah, and one of my grandpa's favorite sayings was, "You're born with two ears and one mouth. Always keep that proportionate and you'll grow." And that just stuck with me. And you go back through the conversations, after we've drug calves all day and you're sitting around the fire, mom and grandma brought dinner to the pens. You're finishing dinner, you put in a hard day's work and you've watched these men and then they sat down to have a conversation and you sat down and listened. You absorbed what these men talked about because you knew they had lived it. They had walked it. You've watched them walk it, and now you hear them speak about it. So as a boy, you didn't jump in and throw your 10 certs worth. You knew your place, and that is if you couldn't raise the IQ level of the conversation, it was best to be quiet and listen. So thinking about that and looking at the way just our entire culture has gone, we've got men that have lost the ability to stand up.
Yeah, I was picking on you last night when we first met, saying, I can tell you're in touch with your feminine side.
Indeed. But that is something that I didn't realize through my entire adult life and trying to be a Christian, because that's our goal. We're going to be a Christian. Well, That's what you're
So
supposed to do.
you were thinking you needed to man up and become a Christian?
But to do this, but at the same time, I had a huge fear because in those days, if God was used, it was used as a punishment or a threat. You didn't spend time with him regularly, but you heard someone cussing him when something didn't go right or the weather was wrong. He was a threat when you were acting up or you didn't fall in line with what needed to be done, or we're going to go, and then church was used as a threat. Well, we're going to go see the pastor. Well, why? So he can stand you up in front and tell you what a little knothead you are. So my generation, a lot of folks had this just fear of God. But then when you did get
unhealthy fear of God,
completely, and irrational is the problem about it, because there's no truth behind it. But you believe this, and you start to get involved in church back in those days. And when you walked into church, you're told, being a man, you need to be quiet. You need to humble yourself, and you need to meek it down. Well, you take young men that are growing up with role models like these men, and you step into a church and you see these strong, assertive women and these little men following them around, you start doing the math. And I didn't even realize this until one of the men in the men's group we started spoke up a couple weeks ago and said, because of the way he grew up, he always saw God as soft. So when it came to hard problems, because of this softness, he was always told that you were supposed to be his man. He didn't think God could fight those battles. And boy, that one really hit me like a baseball bat. And I was like, man, that was one of my large disconnects, is because I was always told that this is what you've got to do to be a man of God. But yet this is who I am as a man. It's in my character, my core. And in mentoring younger men over the last 5 or 6 years, I have a lot of them that they'll call and say, hey, I need some old man time. And they're just seeking wisdom. Just somebody who's been there. You've taken the beatings. You've been hit in the mouth by life, because you start visiting with these young men and you start sharing your walk with them. They look at you like, wait a minute. And you start to talk, these young guys think that they're the first ones going through these battles, and they're the first ones having trouble in their marriage, and all these goals they set for themselves as 10-year-old boys, which we can't live up to anyway, but they're still struggling so hard to get to them, they're missing the point. And if we can just direct that and give them the focus by sharing the wisdom we got, and God constantly tells us not to store up riches for ourselves on earth. I'm starting to realize that's not just talking about money and gold and fancy houses. We gain the silver from everything that we've lived through. And with that comes the knowledge. The knowledge is just like gold. If I shove it in the piggy bank at the house and I do not share it, what worth is it? It has zero worth and zero value. So in mentoring these young men and just visiting with them, they just we need a group of men like you. Young men need a place where they can go and just plug in and be real and tell a man exactly what life is doing to me, and not be afraid of what comes out of our mouth, and not be afraid of judgment at the things that we say. And God just kept pushing me, you know what to do. And I'm really good in a one-on-one environment, because I can sit down and talk to anyone. But to put me in these settings like this, it's really stretching me as a man to just keep pushing. But that's the purpose behind starting it, is there's all ages of men out here are yearning for something more. They know there's more to life than what they're getting. But a lot of them aren't finding it. They're either scared of the church, hurt by the church, or completely grew up without it. And all of those create disconnects. Just like Facebook, Instagram. Everyone has this snapshot of that person's perfect life.
Hard to live up to.
Hard to live up to. You just can't.
Fantasyland.
Yes, sir.
Hard to live up to Fantasyland.
So many of these young men, as they start sharing, they have the same mindset, the same picture of church. to walk in there, I've got to be happy, smiley, and my kids need to be dressed like everybody else is in the youth department, and we've all got to just be happy. Church has been pushed so far to just make everyone happy that a lot of people don't find the healing or even the I don't know, the openness to heal.
Authenticity
that's
lacking.
Yes, it's lacking. And so you take men that grew up hard or grew up with hardcore role types, men who just, their character and their integrity was not for sale. And they can't find that, and they're not finding it. And so many of them are plugged in churches because that's where their family goes, and that's awesome. That is the whole purpose of it. But there are certain men out there who need something more, who are missing that iron sharpens iron. They're missing standing shoulder to shoulder with a man that will look at him and say, knock it off. We're not going to sit here for 30 minutes and discuss feelings. Let's cut to the problem and solve it the way men used to. And as we started sharing it with these younger, they're eating it up. This, every one of them keeps coming back saying, this is what I need. I need men that I can go to with a problem because I know your personal life. If I'm going to trust a man, I want to know that you're doing the same things and that you've walked this. And that is just kind of the whole, everything behind it is give men, young and old, a place to come. But the next concept behind it is everyone's free to share. And the second week, we had two young men, 20 and 22 years old. These young men and their knowledge and understanding of God and the Bible was amazing. And doing this, the older guys there, when we started, I said, everyone's going to have the right to bring their view of what God means to them because everything we're doing is based on God and faith. There's nothing about this men's group that is anything other than God and our faith. But when they shared their viewpoint, the Bible's a living word. As a 22-year-old man, this young man pulled something out of those verses this 54-year-old man never caught when I was 22 because I wasn't reading the Bible. And I will never see it the same way that he does. But by shutting my mouth and opening my ears, we're learning back and forth. The young is teaching the old is sharing things with the young, and we're building a community of safety and security to where if they come to you with a problem, they know that's where it stays and that it's actually going to be prayed on. If we tell you we're going to pray for you, that means as men, we're going to make that commitment to go home and pray for you because we said we would. Integrity and character are everything. And that's just, that's my heart to bring that to this and just let it grow.
Hey, I need to come in there and fix that camera.
Okay. What happened?
I didn't want to be on camera. I think that's what happened. It just turned off.
Just now?
Off for a little bit. I was waiting for you guys to a good spot.
Oh, if I'd known that, I kept talking.
That's what you're supposed to do. You guys are good now.
So between the time today where you're launching this men's meeting group and the time you were growing up on the farm is quite a bit of time between those two places.
A lot of lifetimes.
And you may have learned a few things between then and now.
Yes, sir.
And were you always surrounded by these strong men of leadership? And did you become one?
Yes, I did. And looking back, you can look at growing up in two different ways. You can look at all the things that you disliked. You can focus on those and you can pout on them, and you can even say, well, I had a tough childhood. Or you can back up and look at the result of every tough thing that a parent placed on you, put you through, or allowed you to walk through.
Yeah, fair or not fair?
Fair or not fair? Fair. Who cares about fair? I've never been handed anything fair in my life.
People that want to walk into or attach to a victimhood state care about fair and not fair.
That's all. Fair and not fair. And, a victim mentality, it takes over so easy because it's so much easier for people to sit and stew in their own mess than to reach down and just grab a little bit more strength and stand up one more time. And that victim mentality is a very scary and dangerous place to hang out.
Yeah, adversity can either cripple you or equip you.
Yes, sir.
One of the two.
One of the two. It's your choice. And, ultimately, it's your choice. You can fight through one, push for something better, or you can give up and sit where you're at.
Yeah. Poor, pitiful me.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
We did not allow that in our lives.
No. No, that was not allowed at all. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I was pushed harder. At 10 or 11 years old, as a young man growing up on a farm and a ranch, at 10 years old, you're putting in more hours than most 20-year-old men do today in their jobs that they go to, still doing your school work and anything and everything else. So all of that, and growing up with the men that I did, they're, just military men of direction and focus. And you had a routine and a purpose, and everything was about efficiency. The funny thing was, ever since I was a boy, my grandpa noticed at first, I pick up on details. I watch things most people don't. Well, throughout my life, and you meet people throughout your life who do that too, and a lot of times you visit with them and you find out they came from horrible backgrounds, horrible abuse or things like that. It makes you very aware of your surroundings. And I've met people who have trauma so deep from their childhood, they can tell the mood someone's in by the way a doorknob turns or the way a car pulls in a driveway. So knowing those things and being that kind of a detail, I watch people. And learning and watching my dad. And my dad, he adopted me. I was very young when he came back from doing everything he did, met my mom, and adopted me. And he gave me a chance at life, him and my grandpa. That's hands down. And he loved me. He loved me more than blood ever did. And that was the one thing. He never made me feel anything less. He was always there for me. And he told me when I was young, blood doesn't matter. He said it's a man's character and how he helps people. And he was always setting the example. My grandpa would give you the shirt off his back. And my grandpa was a large man. And my dad, I'm the smallest boy in the family. They were just big men. And when they spoke, when they did something, you didn't mess with them. They stood their ground. But I'll never forget, I was 9 or 10, and, cattle market had taken a hit. And, of course, the economy, and that's about the time the boom in the 80s, the oil boom went down. So, everyone in the state is just struggling. We lived almost 40 miles from town, and Dad and I had gone to the sale barn and took a couple of cows in just to try to make a little cash, get rid of some cattle. And Mom had a list. We went to the grocery store, and we went in the grocery store and got the few things Mom wanted. And we were standing in line, and there was a woman in front of us with 3 kids, grocery cart full of food, and she was, you could tell she had food stamps and just doing everything she could. They got to ringing, and she didn't have the money, and Dad turned around and looked at me and said, "Go put that stuff up." And I just went, you didn't question him. So I went and put it up, and I came back, and he had written a check for these groceries, and he just pointed to me to the pickup, and we got in the pickup, and we made it about 6 or 7 miles down the road. And I said, "Dad, we're not taking anything home." He said, "Single mama has no choice." He said, "She lives in town and has nobody to help her. She's fighting life all by herself." He said, "As long as there's cattle on our grass, all we have to do is shoot one and we have groceries." And boy, that just, that registered really hard. And then about 3 winters later, where there was a huge blizzard. Actually, they brought in National Guard helicopters to feed cattle out of. And 7, 8, 10 days, when it finally got to where you could even move, Dad saddled up a horse. We had cattle he hadn't checked on. And then he was horseback all day long, got in that evening, and finally got in the house, pulled his boots off, had frostbite on his feet. So he and Mom all night long in and out of the bathtub trying to do this. Next morning, as long as I live, I'll never forget, I was sitting in the chair in the living room. He came in and he grabbed those wet boots and shoved newspaper down in them. And I looked at him and he slid those feet right back in them and I said, a man has responsibilities. Doesn't matter, a man has responsibilities. And he walked back out the door in the snow. And when you watch men like that and they set those examples, it just becomes a concrete part of who you are. So as I moved into life and watched the mistakes other bosses made and being an employee, I watched people. I watched the way people treated successful businesses, how their employees were treated, the way they treated people, and the way they treated the businesses around them. So everything that I went through my childhood, I think, made me a hugely successful leader because in its own right, it teaches you humility in its own way without even knowing it. You know, Dad and Grandpa set the example that you're not that important. We're here to help people. It just takes a long time and some age to catch up to realize that lessons you were even being taught young and didn't even know it. So I hope that answers the question. And
yeah, I don't even remember what I asked.
I don't either. I went down a rabbit hole again.
But as you progressed through life, from the time that you were somewhat released from your dad and your grandpa out into your own adventure, what was your life like during that time, being equipped at that young age? And have you always been the fellow that wanted to lead people as a mentor?
Yes, but not in the right way. And that's a big thing of it. So coming from that background, say, you know, and growing up rodeoing and I was an adrenaline junkie. And, you know, Dad bought me a dirt bike when I was 6th or 7th grade. And all he did was just keep adding gasoline to the fire. I've run Mach 5 my entire life. I sit down, sleep 3 or 4 hours a night, wake up tomorrow at 100 miles an hour again. And of course, you're setting that mindset that we get as men. Well, I'm more productive when I'm bowed up and I just run at everything as hard as I can. So, 25, 30 years I was good. I was very good at what I did, especially in my field, in the oil field, and even as a leader. I led a lot of people. I helped a lot of people become successful. If I had done it the right way, there's no telling the impact I could have made. If I had gotten the ego and the man out of the way a long time ago and led and served from my heart instead of being in charge. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons that, the last 30 years has taught me is as far as I'm not that important. What I bring to the situation is important because God has given me that. He's built that. He's mentored it. He's polished it. But by myself, it's not about me.
A lot of people come into Tulsa Talks and talk about God and their life, and sometimes it seems kind of foreign and abstract. You just said something to the effect of, it's not about me, it's about God. It's not about me getting attention. It's about me functioning basically in the way that God has created me, made me, molded me. What does that even mean?
And so here's something else I do. I'm going to go back to the men's group. The whole purpose behind my blind eye on this microphone. But,
the microphone is not a problem. You knock it around, it'll be somewhat adjusted anyway. It'll be there.
All right. And this is maybe this will make sense to you.
What you're saying makes sense to me already.
Right.
I just want to make sure that I'm hearing it from your perspective, and that people that it might not make sense to.
Right. And this is what I'm hoping makes sense. What I've found, run by the question one more time.
You said that it's not important for me to show up in my own ability, basically, but it's important to show up as God has created me or molded me to be.
Yeah, there we go. That ultimately, and this to take us down, we don't have time for this answer, but this is the wilderness journey that I spent with God. To answer that question, the biggest lesson he taught me is what finally put it in perspective for me. And that lesson was my role as a man, as a husband, and as a leader. I read a verse in the Bible, and it hit me like it never hit me before. And I read it, and I spent 2 or 3 months on this verse. Just why is this hitting me so hard? A man's responsibility, we were talking, we visited a little bit last night about a man controls everything around him. From our attitude.
Sets tone.
You set the tone. You set the mood in the room, in a home, no matter where a business meeting. If you're the boss and you walk in with nasty all over you, you've already set the mood in the room.
Yeah, and an employee can actually set mood in a room as well if he has a strong enough presence and he doesn't have to say a word.
Yep, indeed. Noticing and really starting to realize that, I started to watch my marriage. And that's when I hit the verse in the Bible. What does it say about marriage in the Bible? And like I said, I'm not a scholar. And when I sat down to share and with the men, I'm sharing from experience and from just the world whipping me, not an education. I'm not a Bible scholar. I know God the way that I know him. And when I started to look at how I controlled my entire environment around me, and for a long time, I had really been questioning God on my true role as a man. So my nightly prayer became, God, make me a better man of God tomorrow than I was today. But make me the man of God I need to be to shelter, lead, and protect my wife so that she steps into her calling you designed her for. And as I began to pray that prayer, that's when I found the verse in the Bible, husbands, love your wives the way Christ loved the church. You hear it preached all the time. People bring, we'll love you, okay? What does that mean?
Yeah, how did Christ love the church?
So for a man who's been around the world and been in many situations, in many countries, and has seen the way other people live, I really started to dig into this. So we know Jesus lived all those years blameless, spotless, faultless. I can't make it one day without doing that. I haven't met a man yet that can, because we're human. He told us we would be. So he carried that to the cross. But he also carried every sin of every human being before, during, and after. People don't think about that. Take the gravity. Just take your little local world and think about everything that irritates you, the rapes and the murders and the robberies and the domestic violences.
Yeah, we need to go get those people, right?
Right. That's right there in your own neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
We get so focused on that. I just lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that.
You were talking about how Christ loved
loved the church, yes, and the sin, I'm sorry.
And the sin that he took upon himself that is past, current, and future sin of all humanity, and how we're dealing with people in the community doing these atrocities as all men sin, according to what you said, every day, and it's almost impossible to live beyond that. And Christ died for that, and that's kind of how we're
there we go.
to.
Yeah, and that's where I was headed. Is so we think about it in an individual standpoint. Well, he took my sins to the cross. Okay, no, He took everybody. So just think about the worst day in your life, whether it was before you met God or even one of the worst battles you've had in any wilderness journey with God, where he was stripping things off of you to move you to take that amount of sin and then imagine it multiplied by every person on the planet that has been or ever will be. That is the weight of sin that he carried to the cross, not just mine. Every bit of it.
So your worst day added together and multiplied upon each other. Your worst imaginable moment, and add everybody else's worst imaginable moment together. Mm-hmm. And that's what Christ-centered at one. Christ experienced at one time.
Yes, sir. And then stands there ridiculed, abused, beaten, spit on, then drags his own cross up the hill and is nailed to it, dies a human death, goes to hell, stands toe-to-toe with the devil, conquers, overcomes, and then overcomes death to come back and do all of this, when 3 times up to that he said, Father, if I really don't need to do this, we can let somebody else do it.
Yeah.
But no, I'll do it. So we look at all of this he carried it up the hills, nailed to the cross, does all of these things. And we think, man, that was a sacrifice. But what's even bigger than it's the obedience. The obedience it took for him to not check out, to not give up, but to just keep carrying it because it was for my benefit. So.
And at any point, he could have
been done, just walked away. We walk away from marriages. We walk away from friendship. We just walk away because we choose to. It's easier. He could have at any time given up and sentenced us to everything we deserved, and he didn't. But then, as I really started to sink in, I was like, okay, I need to change the way I'm viewing my wife then. So I just really dug into it, and you have times where the Holy Spirit shows up and just floors you. And when it's done, you're just like, oh, okay, that is awesome. This was one of those moments, and it was one of the most amazing ones I've ever had. But as God started to change the view that I had towards my wife and my responsibility, it really, if I'm to love her the way Christ loved the church, that means it's God himself, and then my wife, and then me.
Be willing to die for your wife
every day.
Therefore, you might be able to see from a different perspective of how to interact with her better than you had in the past.
Yes, sir. And then he took it even a step further. Even as your heart starts changing towards your wife, your significant other, you're still viewing her with views of the world, comparing her to this woman or that woman. No matter how you try to focus, if you're still hung up, your heart's not quite right, you're always in a comparison mode in one way, shape, or form. But as God starts stripping these things away, it's the most amazing thing. And this, if I told this story, she'd shoot me. Long story short, I was standing there one day just admiring my wife. She was asleep. And I'm just standing there looking at her laying there. And it just hits me. Adam is in the Garden of Eden, the most perfect place ever in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden. Animals there, pairs. He's in daily communion with God. Just like, hey, what's up? He doesn't even know he's alone, but God recognizes it. Puts him to sleep and pulls the rib out. Fashions Eve. So I really started studying the rib. He took her from the rib. It's a bone of protection. He didn't take her from my shoulder. She's not meant to carry the load that I am. He didn't take her from my hip, so she can't pull the wagon the way that I do. He fashioned her from a place of protection. And just even in the animal kingdom, you take a male lion or the alpha wolf, and someone challenges that. Where is his queen? she always ducks right in underneath, and people always think it's a position of weakness. She ducks in to protect his throat in the case of an attack. She is my bone of protection. She covers my organs. So that means that for me to even put her in the same comparison as myself as equals in a marriage, I'm wrong first, because I'm putting stress, I'm putting responsibility on that's not hers. To realize my place as the leader and realize everything in my marriage feeds off of me. I can blame her for all the things that she does wrong. And I can point out everything that irritates me, the things that which is what we wind up doing in marriage, because it's just this constant contest. When God showed me that and showed my wife there, and at that moment when I realized how God fashioned Eve and where she came, my wife, that is my half. If we truly follow what he tells us, when we leave, we become one flesh. So that means anytime I nitpick at her, I just will hit myself in the mouth. I want to continue finding fault with her. I need to stand and look in the mirror and make sure I'm not wrong before I open my mouth. Once that sank in, then the whole die to yourself every day became like a billboard. And that is leadership, marriage. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you don't die to yourself and get your priorities straight, everything else is fault, or is full of fault and just falls apart so easily, because the biggest thing a man can do is gut check himself and say, I'm wrong. Which took me to the next lesson, and through this and really starting to understand my place, God took it a little bit further and started to show me the difference in right and correct. We all fight and strive so hard to be right. But when you're right, there's always a wrong. This creates animosity because someone wins, someone loses. If we quit trying to be right, if we take the ego, we take our arrogance and we take our pride out of it and quit trying to be right and start trying to be correct. Correct takes everything personal out of it. I want to make sure I'm lining up with the way God thinks, with the way I am supposed to do this. So when I started learning the difference between right and correct, it really started to change everything in our marriage, because I wasn't worried about right or wrong. I wanted to be the correct husband. I wanted to be correct as the leader, the way God designed me, before I did anything else. And you start making the small changes, all the little defenses that your wife has or your employees have start to disappear, because you're sanding all the nonsense off of your edges, and you stop irritating people, because everything you do is from your heart. It's no longer driven by your ego or your brain or your gut or your chip on your shoulder. And that has changed the way I lead everything. Employees, people that I mentor, people that I talk to, but most especially my wife and my family. Behind God, she's first and foremost in my day, every day.
Do you have a mentor?
No, sir. I fight like a dog and growing up, spending so much time by myself, finding peace out in the pasture with just a horse and a dog. God has really used that to an advantage, because I am so comfortable by myself. He and I spend time together. My entire day is prayer time with God. It's not a 5 minutes in the morning. It is a daily conversation all day long. And the more time I spend with him that way, it's kind of like you think of bodybuilding, shooting. The more time you spend doing it, the more you get out of it. And God is just like everything else. The more time you dedicate to him, the more time you truly spend wanting to learn and grow, he'll be right there every day to feed you. But ultimately, a man's biggest thing is to die to himself. You got to get up in the morning, and the first thing you have to do is stop and say, I'm not important, but what God's got for me to do is. Take the ego out of it. If you're angry, take it outside. It's not your wife's fault. She's your better half. when you start to protect her like she is your rib, man, the mental beatings and the verbal beatings really change because you're putting yourself down. But when a man really starts to lift it up and put his wife in her position in the home, the way, to see her grow and flourish is just amazing. But it does the same thing with employees. You give an employee a little bit of the correct motivation. Don't tell him how to do it. Show him how to do it. Lead him in how to do it, which is discipleship. We don't do that anymore. Somebody wants you to Google it and figure it out, or they're going to send you a video to show you how to do this. And people have lost the art of communication. Everybody's so busy buried in a cell phone or a computer that people don't sit down and talk anymore.
So if there's one life lesson that you have learned that you would like to share with us, what is it?
Man, I don't know about one. The best one I can give you, at some point in time, you have to make a stand. You have a choice. You can stand on integrity and stick out like a sore thumb, or you can continue to be part of the problem like everybody else and fold and do what's easy, which is why we have a society of men that'll stand on the sidewalk and pull out an iPhone and record someone getting the fire beat out of them instead of stepping in and stopping the assault. If we don't change the way men think and act, it's going to go downhill a little faster. That's just my opinion.
So choose integrity and stand on what values you've been shown. Right's right, wrong's wrong. I don't care how you color it or how many reward points you get for posting it. Wrong is wrong and right's right. You know what would be awesome? All the AI that's out there now and all the things AI can do. They should develop AI for all social media. And when someone sits down and types out this picture-perfect post of the great marriage and hits post, AI should come back and say, come on, we all know you're lying. You know you're lying. We're not putting that out there. If we could stop this snapshot lifestyle that everybody bases their 24 hours on, we could we would shut down anxiety and we could get people to communicate and actually take the time to connect. But you take, an employer, and I had a young manager that worked under me, and he came into the shop one day and there were two employees sitting down. He wanted to write him up, screaming and yelling about how he was going to fire him, called me, and I said, time out. Where were you at 10 minutes before that? He said, well, I was in my office. I said, so you were sitting in the air conditioner, and those boys were working in the heat. He said, well, yeah. And I said, and then you just walked in the shop, saw him sitting down and had a temper tantrum. Well, yeah. I said, you cannot make decisions based on a snapshot in time unless you know the picture before and the picture after. He said, what do you mean? I said, I told them this morning when they got there at 5:30 to work until both trucks were loaded and sit down in the air for 30 minutes and not move. He said, oh, it's all about perception. Facebook, Instagram. People only put out there what they want to do to make themselves feel better and one-up somebody else. There's no truth in it. There's very little honesty or integrity behind it. People have got to quit basing their life on 5 minutes of somebody else's. Used to be that we would live beside somebody and the grass was greener.
Yes, sir.
Now we take a picture or a video that somebody's lying to us, stretching their truth to try to impress everyone and make sure that everyone knows that their grass is greener.
Yes, sir.
And it's setting up false expectations that are unrealistically received because they're just a bunch of falsehoods. And all that garbage should be thrown into the garbage.
Some people can find some use out of it. Maybe I don't. But I've also reached a point with my relationship with God. If I've got 30 minutes, I'm going to do something good with it. I don't want to sit and scroll Facebook. I don't want to, I'm not going to, I don't do social media. I don't want that. If you've got 30 minutes, you have a choice. You can sit and vegetate, or you can learn. You can do something with it. You know, kind of like useless conversations. If we go into a men's group and you want to sit and talk about a football game for 30 minutes, I'm going to stay home. I really don't care about football. That 30 minutes is time I could spend with my wife or my family. So if I'm going to sit down with you, let's make it productive. Let's stretch each other. Let's push each other's thinking. Let's do something productive. So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I think about it.
Tulsa Talks hopes to inspire people to have meaningful everyday conversations,
Yes.
so that their perspective can change.
Yes.
That's what Tulsa Talks is all about.
That's awesome.
Thanks for coming to help us do that today, Jody.
Yes, sir.
We are here to help you discover or develop your passions, how you can use them, and why you exist. How can we help you help others better?